Hey y'all, it's July. We're here again to do the forecast for the month. We spent a good amount of time like going over the month because we're a little confused of like what it's actually going to happen. There's like big weeks and then contracted weeks, so I'm looking forward to kind of digging into the weeds and seeing what sort of medicinal herbs we find in this proverbial astro garden. I'm Christa, Practical Astros, and I'm here with Mandi Rae. Hi, Mandi.
Hello. Hi. Yay. I'm excited. I'm excited after looking at the month.
Yeah. I think in my head, I was just like, we had so much transition for June that I was just like thinking that the train was just going to keep stopping at every station as it was going along. But we do have some breathing room in July. And looking at the calendar with you prior to this, I was like, okay, maybe we can do this. Maybe we are not all going to die together simultaneously in a firebomb. Just kidding. That wasn't going to happen.
No.
But Uranus is going into Gemini, so really all the rules might be thrown out the window. That won't happen until the 7th. But here's Mandi's calendar. I love it. Love all the emojis. And this is what we'll use for the month. But yeah, what's your general sense of July?
I think a little bit's going to be forced pause with Saturn retrograde in the middle. And that's kind of what, I mean, I think there's going to be change, but that change is almost like internal, mental, and maybe having to field a lot of change. And at that point, you have to kind of sit and assess. And that's what Saturn retrograde in Aries feels like for at least a minute.
Yeah.
But then also the change, the electrification of Uranus and Gemini. That's what word I'm getting. So it's very like, who am I in an identity sense with regard to all the change in the world, in my life, and you can tell things are changing. And I see it in a bunch of clients right now, and I see it my own life, and I see it in so many friends' lives. There's just change, shift. So I know it's not just like one or two charts being electrified at this time. It's everybody.
Yeah. But I mean, we look at the majority of July. So the sun goes into Leo. What day is that? The 22nd. So the first 3 weeks, we're going to be in Cancer season. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the exaltation ruler Jupiter is in Cancer. So, I mean, it is a lunar realm that we're dealing with in Cancer season. And so maybe that's adding to some of the dreaminess of what could it be while we have these electrified stations of especially Uranus, but also Venus going into Gemini. I like that the full moon kind of stands alone in that first like full week of the month with not a lot there. Saturn rules that full moon and is very, very slow. It's stationing to go retrograde a few days later. But to me, it's like, I think it's going to be this dynamic of the still sleepiness of Cancer with these like little pops of electricity. And I think that that'll just create this tension of what's going to happen. I don't know. We get to sit and wait, almost like sitting outside and waiting for the fireflies to start like illuminating. But we start off the month on the 1st, the moon's in Libra, and it is waxing, right? Yeah, it's that first quarter moon. But then the first big aspect that we were going to talk up is Venus and Uranus. Add that last degree in Taurus before Venus moves over into Gemini. So can we look at that chart?
Yes, we can. I'm really I think I'm trepidatious, but not in a bad way. I look at oh yeah, I'm supposed to be going to that. I'm not looking at February. Venus being what it represents, money, love, connection, how we work together, and then Uranus being surprise. It's to me, it's a little it's full of many different possibilities, some being very good. And I think people should take opportunities around this time if they present themselves, and maybe some opportunities come in out of the blue, opportunities for connection with people, opportunities for money, monetary things. But it also could be like, oh no, I have to spend money on this,
Yeah.
so
Surprise.
surprise, so I do think this one does really depend on how it hooks into your personal chart with, I guess, assessing how those surprises could come in. I would, like looking at your own Venus is a really good practice for this conjunction because it's in a Venus ruled sign. So it's just going to activate Venus all over the place, I think.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I'm choosing to look at this one as, Uranus just, it is like literally unpredictable. Like we can say, oh, I'm going to pay attention when Uranus squares Mars. Like that's something that's going to get my attention, but how it's going to express itself in the mundane world or in my life, it's just hard to really know. And that's okay. We get to like observe that. But with Venus there, Venus was retrograde in the previous sign. So the whole time she's been in Taurus, she's been steady, slow, at home. No one's really bothering her. She has spent time with Taurus or with Uranus in the past. So it's almost like the crazy making that Uranus can offer maybe it's not something that is totally, it's not like a new tale that we will learn in Gemini when both of them move there. It's like this last kind of parting gift of that, even though Taurus is a fixed earth sign and Venus is at home there, it's like I feel it might just be this positive punch of a surprise, maybe to free and liberate some of the ideas that we hold very fixed in our aesthetic or the way that we express Venusian themes, whether it's sexuality or romance or style, because she's going to conjoin Uranus and then go into a very liberating social sign of Gemini, where she's not at home. She's not exalted. She's not fallen. She's just kind of liberated. And it's like this liberation gift that Uranus gives her before she moves into Gemini. I feel like that whole transition of the conjunction and then going into Gemini will be very freeing for a beautiful Venus there at that last degree, that crisis degree of like, I took my clothes to the dry cleaner and the dry cleaner's place burned down, and I have this insurance money now to go just buy new clothes. I mean,
there you go. Yeah,
like
that's
who knows?
idea.
Who knows? Yeah,
that's a great metaphor for it, because at the 29th degree, the anaretic degree, like you said, it is the degree of crisis, but it's also the final degree, and in that it ends all of the lessons of that sign and all of the journey of Venus with Uranus there. Every year it's been in Taurus, which is what 2018 is when it moved in, I think. So from 2018 to now, you have to think of the overall themes that have shown up in wherever that's been at in your life. And there will be a finality of lesson here. Now, Uranus will retrograde back, but I'm not sure Venus ever meets up with Uranus again.
in Taurus?
Let me see.
Not in our lifetime, I don't think.
Yeah. Oh, wait, no, we have one more in 2026.
Unless you die before then. Yeah.
Unless you die before that. Hopefully not. But I mean, honestly, the way 2025 and 26 go together in that springtime and all of these things, you'll get this opportunity and then you'll get another opportunity and then that's it. So yeah, the next one after that's going to be in Gemini. So yeah, I think you could also look at the July 4th through April 23rd, I believe is what it was, when it hits it again as a cycle. This is like a new moon, but it's with Venus and Uranus. Yep. And it's that cycle from July 4th through then, you can almost point in a direction, listen to what's going on, see what's going on in your life and go, okay, this time frame, I've got one more conjunction. What is the theme? What house is it happening in? Where is it at in my chart? For me, it's my 11th house. So it's how I reach out to the outer world and to my future goals, so I think about it like that. I'm a Cancer rising. You're a Scorpio rising. So it's your relationships and clients, maybe, like all of these themes. And that's really what the surprise liberation probably will reflect, I think. But yeah, crisis, finality, one more shot in April of 2026.
Yeah, and almost like just to piggyback on that, having them conjoin again at it's like 29 degrees 53 minutes next April. Mm-hmm. So one of my favorite things, I have Uranus in the first house, so I feel like I experience Uranus, which feel and experience as an embodied thing. When a planet's in your first, a lot of times that can show up that way. It's like I will get electrified very easily. Like even when other people in the room don't get electrified, I get shocked. I get electrocuted often. Like it just has always happened to me. There was this one place that I went with my family and there was a hot tub, and every time I put my hand in it, I would get an electric current, and they were all in it fine. And they would get out and get back in, and nobody was getting shocked, but I was clearly getting electrocuted. Like it was somehow ungrounded. It's just story of my life. I just get electrocuted. And I think having Uranus in the first gives me a little bit of credential to speak on Uranus. It's that electrified insight that just comes out of nowhere. Trust it when it comes. Trust it with the Venusian themes. Trust it with Venus at home. So wherever Taurus is in your chart, trust that insight to then think of ways to materialize that insight to happen, to come to fruition by next April. Like if you get a really great idea on July 4th, if you have a great dream and you wake up with this weird pattern that you then draw on paper and then put in Canva and then make a whatever it is, like get that insight, grab that lightning thought, and then carry it forward and see if you can actualize it, materialize it, because it's in an earth sign. And then by next April, maybe that in itself then grows to something you can then spread out even further when it goes into Gemini. So
that's right. That's exactly right. And the very next day, we could go ahead and look at that. Is it the very next day?
It's later that day. Venus goes into Gemini.
Venus goes into Gemini, and Neptune stations retrograde. I was thinking about how this time period is so full. So I actually have, if you look at my calendar, I have the Venus-Uranus conjunction on the 3rd because it hits that 29th degree on the 3rd. And there's so much happening right around here. I think it's something to note is that it'll be active July 3rd. So even though the exact conjunction is 7:45 a.m. And then I believe the next thing is Neptune stationing retrograde that day. I could be wrong. Let me see what time that happens. Neptune stations at 4:33 p.m. So let's see what time Venus goes into Gemini. And that is 10:30 a.m. So it's like 7:45 a.m. Venus, Uranus.
3 hours later.
3 hours later, Venus moves into Gemini, and we'll start to trine Pluto. We'll start to sextile Saturn and Neptune. And then the very next thing is 4:30, Neptune stations retrograde in Aries. I find that really, I guess, intriguing and poignant that Venus will sextile Neptune. Just, I guess, not exactly, but as it stations retrograde. So it's like there's something to that. There's some, I don't know, some inspiration I think we're supposed to gain from that sextile as Neptune is stationing retrograde.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, just by whole sign, that early degree of Aries to the early degrees of Gemini, they're close enough. They're within a couple of degrees of each other that having that sextiles are harder to spot because they're that first opportunity to kind of see what can come of that. It's like the first time they can like gain sight of each other. And the socialness of Gemini with Aries, I really like, of like Venus and Neptune kind of seeing each other, Saturn, like, this dark lord over Venus's shoulder. Venus and Saturn will spend a little bit more time together as far as that. But yeah, I like that. I would look at just all of July 4th feels like it's going to be a loaded day, and that we're going to feed off of the information that we get that day for like the first couple of weeks of July. I feel like these inception stories are going to continue to unfold and tell us from the auspicious, ominous, coincidental things that happen I think July 3rd, I think you're right, and into the 4th. And then that whole weekend, I feel like we're going to just like, it's like a big banquet that we're going to keep going back to and discover new things that we can pick off the plate.
Yeah, and even going into like the 4th and the 5th, let me switch this to 0 Aries because I want it to stay the same so that we don't get confused. Excuse me for uno momento. Okay, so then I was thinking also the moon will be connecting Mars and the sun to an extent. So especially when it's like more like 10, 11 degrees, the sun's at 13.
Oh, yeah.
And there's this other thing going on. So the moon will be in Scorpio that day. And it does seem very full, but it also, with Neptune stationing retrograde, I keep thinking if Neptune is spirituality and inspiration, then the retrograde sometimes can be more of the confusion and delusion. So that's something to look at, but also sometimes I look at it as the fog clearing up, but it's just such a station is when it's moving its slowest. It appears to go backwards in the sky. Of course, we can't see Neptune, but maybe you can if you have a telescope. But it's one of those things that it gets louder. And how does the fog get louder? Does it get thicker? Does it get more confusing? Does it clear up? There's a lot of different ways. I'm not totally sure, but I feel like spirituality is a little harder to come by with Neptune retrograde, or a connection to that, almost like we're not supposed to be dealing with that for like 6 months out of the year. Now, that's my conjecture, as I study. You don't know until you figure out, okay, every time Neptune is ingress somewhere, it's been this. And you can look at history, but how's it felt,
Yeah, I mean, my experience with Neptune is, and maybe in natally, I have Neptune retrograde and a fire sign. It's the only fire planet I have is a retrograde Neptune.
Oh, wow. So
it
you can
squares my Saturn, which is stationing to be retrograde. And so like I have this, like the way that I negotiate with understanding Neptune is to basically reflect backwards. And using I don't really assume spirituality with Neptune, but I utilize or associate spiritual practices and the behaviors with Neptune that I experience spirituality more in a Venusian and lunar way, and Neptune is almost like it shows examples of, like, to me Neptune is, I think of it just more archetypal and looking at stories of Neptune to kind of meander backwards to truths. And just like the way that I visualize it, if we think of Neptune as foggy or murky, if you're in a foggy place, you can't see forward, but you can kind of see where you've come from. So you can see the pattern or the spiritual behavior that has gotten you to this point, and you can utilize that own spiritual practice of, like, before we were recording, you were like making sure your desk was clean. It's like cleaning an altar space is a performance for spiritual work, but it in itself is not spiritual work necessarily. It's like the behavior of it, the behavior, the muscle memory of the spiritual work. But in a fire sign, it's in an Aries, especially, it's like, to me, it's like spiritual work in the way that we defend because it's martial, or identify because it's Aries. And to me, that's kind of what I'm trying to understand. And I'm looking forward to the retrograde to like kind of dig into, one, it's going to go back into Pisces and we'll be able to finish that Pisces story. But then I just find that I like Neptune better retrograde because I feel like I can understand it more. And that might just be my own natal signature. It's just been my experience with it the whole time.
Yeah. And I mean, this is the first time we've ever experienced Neptune in Aries as living humans. I mean, no one alive has a 166-year orbit. So Neptune was last in Aries at the Civil War. We went over that extensively. And I think whenever we did the Ingress episode. Yeah. So that being said, this is the first time we've ever experienced a Neptune retrograde in Aries, and it's like, so it really is all conjecture when it comes to the felt experience of it. But I love that you have it retrograde in a fire sign, because I do feel like that is a really great way to look at it. Just looking backwards. And because it's in Aries, looking at your actions, the muscle memory in that way. And I do think it's ideology. So it's Neptune is the unnameable. It's kind of Christ consciousness in my head, the archetype of it. You can't really describe it. It's hard to pin down. That's literally the nature of it.
Yeah.
So, I look at ideology. That's sort of an abstract concept, and I look at all of the abstract concepts that you can come up with, the ether, the inspiration of it, and the retrograde there is, reimagine maybe.
I do think having Neptune so close to Saturn in Aries, I think it is softening Saturn. Like, because I haven't been able to extract a definite Saturn Aries hue yet. Like the tone of Saturn and Aries to me hasn't really shown up. And I feel like it's because it's just being forged in the fires of the fiery sea of Neptune right now. I feel like I will understand Saturn a little bit better when it separates a little bit more from Neptune after it goes retrograde and after it goes forward. And it's similar to like if you have a stellium in your chart, like that was one of my early questions when I was learning astrology from a teacher, was really trying to understand. It's like, I have 2 stelliums in my natal chart. Like, how am I supposed to understand my Mercury, outside of it being next to my sun and my moon? How can I extract those 3? And the answer was, you don't. That's not your chart. Your chart isn't the sun, Mercury, and moon in separate places. They're all together. They're all informing each other. They're all influencing each other. And the degree of how close or how far away they are in a sign also affects that. They're in different bounds. They're in different decans. At least some of them are. So don't try to think of them in different ways. They're not isolated. And so with Saturn is there, but it is so close to Neptune that I'm giving myself the time to figure out what does Saturn and Aries mean this time around, once it gets kind of clearer away from Neptune. And we're really not going to have much time before it. I mean, its entirety of its journey through Aries, Neptune is going to be co-present. And I feel like it's just going to soften it a little bit. We won't, it's hard to know that, if what I'm saying is just kind of what I'm feeling is happening.
Yeah. And that's what you're going to get when we talk about Neptune every single time. Because that's how Neptune is. And I was just kind of exploring, just as Neptune stations retrograde on the 4th, Venus moves into Gemini. And then the 6th, the moon will oppose Uranus just before it moves into Gemini. And I thought that was between that and Venus exactly sextiling Neptune and getting into that trine with Pluto. Those are pretty big deals. The moon does move fast, but if you look at the moon as it's like a time spark or something. I don't know. It's like when the moon makes a connection to something that's about to happen, it really makes it present and felt. And so I think the moon opposition to Uranus just before it stations will be something to note, especially with regard to your own feelings, because Jupiter's in Cancer, making those bigger, no matter what we do. And the moon is uncomfortable in Scorpio, so it's going to be looking at Uranus going, I am a little jealous that you are in my favorite vacation spot. And what are you doing there? What have you done, kind of a thing. But maybe it'll be something like, oh, I can finally release all this deeply held emotion, because that's Scorpio deep kind of lake that just holds it there, so it's like lightning hitting a swamp a little bit. So that July 6th, 4:30 p.m. moment, I think, is going to be something to note, especially if you're fixed signs and have anything at late degrees of fixed signs. And at the same time, Venus sextile Neptune, I like that you said Venus for you is a little more spirituality, like in your archetypal understanding of it. So that should be something, that's a good inspirational moment. I think people may get some great ideas. This is like how new businesses form and stuff like that when you have these signs involved. And Venus trine Pluto as well coming up. I guess the next
day,
which is when Uranus moves into Gemini. So yeah. Oh yeah, and Pluto's retrograde. So they kind of pass each other um as it's going to that third degree. That's really cool. Let's see when Venus is trying Pluto. And is it just before or is it during?
So that's like it's just before. It's like maybe 12 hours before. Oh no.
Yeah, Uranus goes into Gemini at 2:47 a.m. and Venus trines Pluto at like 3:47 or something.
So basically the same time.
Yeah, it's at almost exactly 60 minutes after Venus will trine Pluto. So, that's why we keep going. This is a really full moment. It's because even little bitty things like the moon opposing Uranus as it moves into Gemini is pretty wild as far as, looking at astrology charts. You have your ideas of what aspects are wild, and when things pile up together in just a few days and you're seeing, and the moon hits it, and this happens, then it's like this is going to be a big moment.
Yeah, the fact that Uranus is there at that last degree, the moon opposes it, and then they both switch signs. The moon moves very quickly, but it's just a few degrees away from it's opposing Uranus and Venus there. Yep. And moon in Sag is different than moon in Scorpio, but I kind of like that that the moon is there to kind of usher in that threshold of Uranus going into Gemini. Having a Sag moon, with Uranus going in there to Gemini, it's just
it's really cool.
Yeah. It's really sparkly. It's like tons of glitter and sequins on that whole weekend.
Very much
maybe
so.
Showing up to work and having still glitter on you still, from all the sparkle from the weekend.
Oh my gosh. That is, I also think of the nature of Uranus being revolution too. And I can't really unsee that, especially with Venus trine Pluto in Aquarius. There just seems to be, I don't know, an era of very good, like almost collaboration, people working together for something. In a sense that we have to change something, like we have to maybe speak our voices. I don't necessarily see violence or anything, although I guess Pluto does have its own implications with power and things of that nature. So it does look good though. They're all trines. There's arguments to be made about trines to Saturn and how they're not necessarily great, but I tend to open myself up to, like you said, Saturn being a little softer with Neptune there, and Saturn also being in its fall, or is it detriment? I get confused.
Saturn is fallen in Aries because it's exalted in Libra. Yeah,
that's right.
I just see it as being very social and chatty. All the text threads just light up Monday morning because we have that Mercury Leo. Leo Gemini are chatty friends. If you're a Gemini, you have a Leo friend, you talk, you have fun when you talk, and it's just like that fire and air. You just kind of it's the dynamic duo to me. I love Leo Gemini together. So Leo has Mercury there, which rules Gemini, and is sextiling that Uranus and that Venus together. Leo Aquarius oppose each other. So, Mercury's already gone through that opposition, but Mercury is also talking to the Aries house and is talking to the Sag house. So it's it just feels like a lot of conversations going on. You have those days where you yourself are perfectly caffeinated to just respond to all of the various messages that come through. And I just feel like that's kind of be like this kind of morning. And maybe we're doing it because something crazy has happened.
I know.
Or we're just doing it because it was like a really busy weekend and now you have time to want to catch everybody up on what you've done and you want to know what they've done. It doesn't have to be catastrophic. We just don't, with the Uranus thing, it's just really hard to know. Yeah, we can look at it and yes, every time the US has been at war, which we're kind of always at war, it feels, but Uranus has been in Gemini, the big wars, Uranus has been in Gemini, but it doesn't have to be that way. And we will find out if it is. We are on the precipice of doing that again, based on the illegal actions that our president has done by bombing another sovereign country without legal requirements from our Congress decides to go to war, not the president. This might be a retribution for those actions. that could happen. The whole July 4th weekend, that could happen.
Yeah.
But we also don't know. Sam Reynolds did a live Instagram today. He posted on Twitter and Blue Sky about Mars conjoining the South Node and how that signature was present for 9/11 and how that's going to be present later on this month in July. And that usually it means some sort of terror, how it was present, at the onset of COVID, which was kind of terrorizing in its own way. So, I mean, but the anxiety of it is already there. Like we're already beginning to feel a little bit terrified about what could happen. So I'm not trying to discredit that, but
I mean,
we are not fortune tellers to say like, I can tell you exactly how it's going to happen because we don't know. We can just assume, we can use historical records, we can use our intuition, but we do not have a secret code to exactly how it's going to play out. That's just not how astrology works, folks.
Just like, hold on. Let me consult my magic salt lamp.
Yes.
No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I have a ton of stones over here, and I do dream work. I mean, I will say. So I've practiced lucid dreaming for a couple of years now successfully. The last couple of weeks, maybe 6 weeks or so, I have my favorite labradorite orb. It's like this big. It was like a $30 labradorite ball. And I've been holding it when I dream. I've been holding it when I go to sleep. And sometimes I'll lose it in the bed. And my husband's like, why do we have this rock in the bed? I hold it. And then I've been playing around with holding a different stone for a couple of nights to kind of see. And the fluorite one has been very helpful, but that labradorite stone has been such an ally working in the dream. And I would say that there are inventive ways that you can participate with your reality. And you may not believe me when I say that it helps in my dream work, but that's like my own connection and response to, I did not grow up using crystals. I feel like I'm a Luddite with crystals for the most part. I always have to defer to someone else that knows, but I have an embodied experience and a tangential experience through working with stones and in my dream. And to me, that feels Uranian. It's like figure out ways and just play around with it, have fun with it. It's Gemini, have fun with it. And also there's like this magic that you don't know is going to help you. Someone might have been able to see in my chart, hey, you should work with this stone because it's going to help you in your dream work. But again, like we just don't know. We play around with it. We do our best. We create the space, but astrology is not like this. I don't know if you have this experience, Mandy, but sometimes when people find out I'm an astrologer, it's almost like they feel like they're naked.
Yeah.
Like I can see all of their secrets. And it's kind of like, I mean, if I was a meaner astrologer, I would roast you on your astrology chart. I would have a business making fun of you for all your shitty placements. But I just like, it's just not like that. We are doing our best. And so I will hazard that warning, but also it's like, don't waste your imagination on things being absolute worst as they have been in the past. Like we will get to find out, and knowing a little bit ahead of time that Mars or that Uranus is going into Gemini on that day, maybe don't go to a hot tub that is like poorly grounded. I don't know.
That's right. And that's the thing, like you said, when you have like stationary retrogrades that, in a sign that can be war. I mean, Aries can be, and then you have Uranus moving into Gemini, and it's been in a sign that was, and we have it going on right now. So it's not a far stretch to say, be on the lookout, be on the awareness is really all you can say for these moments. And and Mars in Virgo does amp up the anxiety a little bit. So there is, I just like that if we have, let's see, Mercury is in Cancer at this time, right?
Leo,
thank you. Right, because it goes retrograde. So Mercury and Leo, I mean, that's going to be spending time in your creative places, in your inner child, and your play, and your fun, and your joy. And that may be the best way to use the Mars anxiety is, okay, you know what? I cannot fix what's going on in our government right this moment. It's July 4th. Let's just have fun for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's just let it go. And, the way this works is then there's a full moon, right? So full moons in themselves are amplified energy. So that's where we go into, I guess this first 2 weeks is it's not full of aspects like every day. For instance, the 8th and 9th, the moon's moving, but that's about it. All these things have happened already. So Thursday through Monday, yes, big July 4th weekend. But then we get into the full moon and it's like, okay, things start to slow a little bit. Now, Uranus in Gemini is busy and it's fast, but Saturn is stationing. Saturn turns retrograde on the 13th, and that's the Sunday after this. So the full moon is Thursday the 10th, and it is answering to Saturn moving very slow. And you can kind of see, it's almost like, you see the Acme cartoons and like one of them's running toward a cliff and then they realize it's a cliff and they start backpedaling like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm feeling with the full moon. And we'll look at this right now. But it feels like, okay, that was crazy. Whatever just went on, and it may be fun, maybe exciting, maybe electrifying, but okay, it's time to maybe pause for a second and see what's going on, so here we go.
Yeah, like you said, there's not a lot of individual changes of aspects, but I think because the moon is waxing to become full, that it might feel like there's one very complicated story that Uranus and Venus together, and then Uranus and Venus in Gemini. I feel like it's just going to be like this, like it's going to be something that we just like extract over time, and so it's like that's the story that we're just going to be talking about and unraveling and exploring, and I feel like we're just going to feed off of that during that full moon. It might feel that way. It might feel the same way, but there's not a lot of other stuff going. But I feel like that's going to be enough.
It will be.
We'll be filled with the information of that Uranus and Venus conjunction in Taurus, and then the move over into Gemini with that moon opposing it, and then all the new aspects that when something goes into a new sign, it hits Pluto, it hits Neptune, it hits Saturn. Or in your own chart, if you have early degrees of an air sign, early degrees of a fire sign, because it's going to hit it to some degree, or early degrees of a mutable sign, it's just going to, that new transit is just going to really, it's going to give us plenty to journal about, even though it's quote, just one ingress.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, because as we look, so we were on the 7th when Uranus moved into Gemini, and then we go like it'll be through Sagittarius, and then when it moves into Capricorn, it's going to right before it gets full, it's going to oppose Jupiter. It's going to square Saturn. It's going to square Neptune earlier on the 9th. So you'll have that part of the square, and I think the moon is taking center stage for a minute, and I think that's because Jupiter's in the moon sign. So you get the moon. The other thing I want to note just really quickly too is that Black Moon Lilith is in Scorpio, which is where the moon moves slow. So we get a fallen moon, and then a moon in detriment as it's going into the full moon, and the fallen moon is going to be there for like maybe an extra few hours because it's moving so slow. So you've got this really slow, like emotional stuff going on in Scorpio, and then the full moon, it's like really big because it's going to oppose Jupiter, it's going to square Saturn, and so that could feel a little turmoil-y. I could see that feeling that way. The moon will trine Mars as it gets to full as well, and that in and of itself can excite or enrage or impassion or whatever, and it's pretty well illuminated when it trines Mars, so it's only 5 degrees away from the full moon. So that's just something I wanted to note, because you're right, there's not many outer planet, the outer ones are just holding, it's like they're in a holding pattern. Jupiter is moving, but other than that, it's Mercury and the moon, and then you have Mars and Venus that are going to be the center stage plus the sun for a minute. But the moon is really, really loud at this time, I think.
Well, and the moon is hosting the sun and Jupiter, so it's almost like it's taking its time, even going through Capricorn. And while the moon is hosting the sun and being full in Capricorn, I think that's why I like Cancer season so much, is for the Capricorn full moon. I just really like that inverted reflection with the sun in the moon's temple, and then the moon opposite its own space. I don't know, it's just like this real big reflection time of all the light and this turning of the season, and like taking stock of where we are midsummer, and just like that practical, a little cold moon, just being like, this is the truth. It's just very like, this is the truth of the situation. And the truth of the situation is, I'm connected to Mars, I'm connected to Saturn, I'm connected to Neptune, I'm connected to Jupiter, I'm connected to the sun. The only thing is I can't see is Mercury, Uranus, and Venus, which are already talking to each other. So I don't have to worry about that. And I'll see Pluto, tomorrow. So I'm not going to worry about like shining the light on that. I don't know. It's just like the moon really is this huge scrying mirror, just reflecting all of the truth that is happening in a very, like logistical, practical way. And I just appreciate that of every year of the Capricorn full moon. It doesn't feel as crazy as the Sagittarius full moon and Gemini season.
No, and
it does have like that dynamic piece to it.
Yeah, it does, and it is not trine Uranus anymore either, because this is the first Capricorn full moon without Uranus and a sign-based trine to it. So it's like, I don't know. I also like how you said, it's all a big reflecting scrying mirror, because if you chase down the rulers, you would keep going in a circle. There is not one ruler that's ruling the roost. A lot of times you can be like, oh, well, this is answering to this, and you get to the end and it's like, oh, Venus is in Taurus. That's the ruler that's really dominating, or
the
whatever.
Final dispositor.
The final dispositor. That's what we call it in astrology.
Oh, you know it as the final dispositor.
But there isn't one. It's just like,
it just bounces.
It's bouncing. And so I was just thinking about that when you were going through that, because you're right. It's very much a reflector at this moment. I do like that it's sextile the North Node. I think that's pretty cool, because it kind of zeroes in on this. The moon is what gets eclipsed, and it does eclipse the sun sometimes, right? So these two luminaries being connected to the North Node there is almost like, I know that's coming soon. I know that the eclipse season's coming.
That gets my attention. So so we're going to have one more full moon before the eclipse full moon, right? So we'll have the full moon in Aquarius, and then we're going to have the next one is going to be that eclipse. And so that eclipse is at 18 degrees. And 18 degrees is where the full moon is in Capricorn.
That's right.
18 is a lunar number. So
yeah, that's really cool. And I mean, I think too, well, let's just go ahead and look at Saturn retrograde since we're here, because it's only 3 days later.
Yeah, and so I think it's cute that Saturn is not retrograde at this point. So the next full moon with Saturn being retrograde will be the Aquarius Leo full moon situation, not this one, which I was like, Saturn waited. It's kind of like, all right, I'll wait, and I'll just, like, Aquarius will have to deal with me being retrograde, but I'm just doing Capricorn a solid this time.
That's right. Yeah. And in fact, I'm just going to sit my ass right here and wait it out, because it's sitting at, what is it? The one more minute, and it's at its retrograde
56
moment. So, I mean, it's funny. I wonder when it hits 56. I have to see. Oh, there it is. So
July the 11th.
And that's when it hits its exact stationary degree in minute. That means it's not moving forward from this point, and then it stations retrograde on the 13th, and it turns around. So yeah, that's when, oh, well, I have the 12th. Okay.
It's midnight Eastern. So yeah.
That's right. So 12th, 13th, it's in that range. And Saturn retrograde is, I have a big caution. Like, it's like you can't go that way right now. It's gotta wait it out.
Yeah, it's like on the full moon, like the construction workers are already putting up like the tape to be like, heads up, you're not gonna be able to go down this road for like 6 months. So just turn around.
That's what, and the Uranus and Gemini is the warning that you get, like the little handout you get in the mail. It's like, hey, your road's gonna be closed.
Yeah.
And by the way, move your car off of that road or we're going to tow it, so you got those kind of little warnings. And then Saturn comes in and is like, all right, road closed for a minute. We got some work to do. We have to restructure this. I really left some things undone in Pisces. I got to go back and redo. And so it does. It feels, that's the pause that I'm seeing. And that whole week it's sitting there. And what do we look at it? Mid-August is when it finally leaves.
Oh, right. Yeah. Degree. August 16th. So it's a full month before it even leaves that degree. It's going to sit there. So if you have, what's the exact degree? It's
01. It's 01.
0156. So if you have a first degree cardinal placement or fire sign, or even an air sign that might connect with it, you're going to feel that station. If you are in a Saturn ruled perfection year, or on your solar return, whatever your time lord is in whatever system, if you're in a Fredaria period, so you're looking at Saturn, looking at transits of Saturn, that station usually is felt. And it can it can be louder to Saturn ruled people just in general. Saturn stationing, if you have Saturn in Aries natally, you've had this first little peek into your Saturn return, and it's going to, go back into Pisces, and then you'll get it again. Again, I think having that Neptune there softens it. But this is, if things have been incredibly difficult, like say that you're experiencing your first or your second Saturn return during, Saturn and Aries, look forward to that retrograde where it's going to then ease off. And then you get to try it again. It's like, okay, you'll have the muscle memory next time.
Yep. And right after this, so it sits there, and right after this is going to be Mercury retrograde.
A few days later.
July 17th.
Yeah.
So it's like that whole week is really almost about, you get the moon going from Capricorn to Aries. So that's something to note, that whole week. But July 17th, Thursday, Mercury stations retrograde at 1534. And I kind of want to look at, where is the station direct is 414. So let's go back to, I want to see when it's at 414 so we know when the shadow is. Because I think, okay, so that's, and we're recording this June 23rd, but the fourth degree around where inner shadow is June 29th. So that's when it will, it'll be returning back to that degree. So I think at the turn of the month, that's like, okay, start paying attention to Mercurial Leo stuff here.
Yeah, and that's interesting because when Venus and Uranus go into Gemini, the ruler of Gemini, it's Mercury. Mercury is already entered shadow. So it feels like it could be related to that. That shadow work. Like, what's this pathway of the illumination of that solar place of Leo, where Mercury is? Mercury is going in and kind of getting, like, Mercury itself might be receiving the omens or the dreams or the synchronicities, or like seeing the red cardinal, finding the dimes on the ground, whatever it is, you get from the psychopomps in your life. You're starting to see that, and then those revelations with that Gemini house and Uranus and Venus being there is connected to that. Maybe that's what maybe that's what the Leo and Gemini houses will be speaking of, is that those odd coincidences, and like, what does it mean? Like, let's dig into the mystery. I think just like the dynamic duo of Gemini and Leo, like, could solve crimes, but it's like solving the mysteries of the mind, with that Mercury retrograde. Mercury is going to stay in Leo the whole time it's retrograde. So we're not crossing over any sort of threshold with signs. It's the only retrograde Mercury is having this year where it does that. It's just, it stays in Leo the whole time. When it goes retrograde in the late fall, winter time, it's going to cross over its Sag line. So this is just purely Leo the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And I love that it stations retrograde with a sextile to Venus in its home sign. That is super amazing to me.
Yeah.
I think just because it's being informed by Venus and Gemini and Uranus to that matter, because they're both in the same sign. So it's like, oh, wait a minute. This is something I didn't think about, So I really like that.
And I think that 15, yeah, so 15, it's in Virgo, but 15 is the exaltation degree of Mercury when it's in Virgo. But I like that they're at both at 15. Leo can't see Virgo, but Gemini sure as hell can see it at 15. Mars is just past that. And it's like the Jupiter and Mercury both have that 15-degree exaltation. I just couldn't remember exactly if Mercury was just mimicking Jupiter. But yeah, I like that's at that point, meaning there at that 15th degree. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, so you could really become aware of some Venusian issues or something, I think, around this time and I would look to the house that Gemini occupies and Leo. I know exactly what it's about for me. But that being said, all Cancer risings is happening in your money and your I guess your subconscious areas, your second and 12th house. So it's, how are those connected,
just your thoughts on on money consciousness.
Exactly. And that's how you would interpret that. If you're a Scorpio resident, it's easy to give us our own charts as examples, but
the 8th and the 10th. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's happening that way. We know each other well enough that we know how our lives are, setting up even this moment. And so I love that. But I also think it may be a catalyst for what the Venus Mars square and the Sun square Chiron at the same time. Let me go back to that calendar. Because I think that's the next thing that happens. Yeah. So
I wanted to mention, so the emojis that you put on the 18th, what it reminded me of is that moment in Pulp Fiction when Uma Thurman is like,
she does
be
that.
A square.
Yeah.
And it like lights up on the screen. It's like, to me, it's like, don't like the idea of the way that Mercury can expand out. It's like, don't keep yourself in this limited box. And maybe the power of a retrograde, it's kind of like, how do I break free and be that creative expression of my Leo self? Whatever Leo house is for you, it's related to your sun. Everybody's got a sun sign. Like, how is that connected? And how can you keep yourself from being constricted and hemmed in? It's almost like, don't declaw your Leo house. Like, let that Leo house like rip through, and use the retrograde as ways to kind of find creative ways to express out, but don't like keep yourself in that box. When I saw that, I was like, it's just like Uma Thurman.
It is. And I put the I because, Leo is very much about you're seeing yourself in the full sense, in the identity sense and the regal sense, that's what Leo is really about. And I think the retrograde of Mercury there is, maybe how am I not honoring that, especially with the sun in Cancer, because that rules Leo. And, what am I feeling about that part of my life right now? So, I mean, that's all mixed up together, like we were saying anyway. There's because you've got Gemini, you got Cancer, you have just something everywhere. But I do think it could be a catalyst for this moment on the 20th, which is, to me, it's like something we're going to leave behind. And that's not to say that I think we'll get into the stuff, like, for instance, what Sam was talking about in a minute, but this, like, personally speaking, if you're looking at your micro world, not the macro, it is really a moment of, okay, I cannot worry about this anymore. This has wounded me, the sun square Chiron, or this is really bringing me grief or bringing me down. And then Mars at the South Node is like, I'm letting this go. I cannot do this anymore, So I guess that's supposed to be a ball and chain that's being cut, but it also kind of looks like a bomb
I know,
once it
that's what I
gets
thought it was.
cut off. Like I was like, why does it look like that? I didn't really, I guess, perceive that.
Yeah, when
But
you release yourself of those things, make sure that you have a container to properly dispose of those things so that you don't
yes,
just have like, don't exercise your demons and then just let them go willy-nilly, like encapsulate them and properly dispose of them. Because if we are talking
yes,
about Virgo, there is an order and a process to these things.
very true.
I mean, like if we think in the Vedic sense of the South Node as being this place to surrender to in a spiritual sense, to kind of, it's like the Bodhisattva relinquishing the physical or material needs to surrender to the spiritual needs.
Mm.
And you know, Mars being there, Mars and Mercury's place, you know, combining together at that 19th degree, the tarot card associated with that middle of Virgo is the 9 of coins, and you see this well decorated woman in a garden, and she has a bird, which I think is Mercury. You know, she is isolated, she's alone, but she kind of has, she's got it going on, and there is this abundance, there's like this success point. And to me, that's what I think of with that, just that decan of Virgo, is you have worked very hard to eliminate the unnecessary things to get to this point where all your needs are met, but you're also isolated. You've also kind of got here and you don't have the connection like you would in Pisces. You know, you're kind of, you have cut away so much that your physical needs aren't really, you know, you don't have that drive anymore. And so it feels like a little double-edged. It feels a little bittersweet.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, in your own life, just looking at, like you were saying, like we can look at it in the mundane, in the larger sense of maybe it being associated with terror, but the way to soften that hard edge, anxiety ridden Mars with the South Node is you know, imagine yourself, what does success look like for you in the material sense? And is it aligned with your success in a spiritual sense? And don't be so anal about it. You know, with Mars and Virgo, it can be just so like furiously specific that you really paint yourself into a lonely island. And just kind of weaving those nodes together, of weaving the compassion and the connection with Pisces with that South Node and Virgo. Just, you know, the other thing that I wanted to bring out, just with the socialness of all the things happening in Gemini, and then the concern of, you know, maybe what this Mars with South Node might portend in a global or national sense, is a way to preemptively prepare, is to get to know the people around you, you know your neighbors, like have, like for 4th of July, maybe have like a neighborhood potluck, or like if you have a street that you can have like a street party on, or have like a community yard sale where you just have the reason and excuse to kind of get each other's phone numbers, get each other's first names. If you don't know your neighbors, doing it before all this kind of stuff happens, it's just a good excuse to kind of have protocol. That's what we in Western North Carolina learned the hard way. And it was a beautiful silver lining of dealing with, you know, a geological event that was a storm that cut us off from internet and power and water for some of us for months. No, like having the reason to get to know our neighbors and then do mutual trade and mutual aid with each other. That's what we learned how to do. And to do it ahead of time, to already have that prepper mindset of the relationships, is so much easier when you're not doing it out of desperation. So use the socialness of Gemini to be chatty with your neighbor, and just, you know, to say like, I know this is weird, but I have a friend in Asheville. You can use me as your excuse. I have a friend in Asheville, and they went through this thing, and it turns out that, you know, getting to know their neighbors was like the best advice that they wanted to share to everyone they knew. So here's my phone number. If you ever need anything, call me. Like going ahead and building those relationships. If you never need them, great. but you have them ahead of time. And then when Mars and Uranus, when Mars and the South Node come together, if something happens, if we have a solar flare and we lose the power grid and you have no way of connecting with people that live just a few miles away, nobody's credit card machines are working, so you can't buy gas. It's like you're kind of stuck wherever you're at. Knowing what your neighbor's first name is and checking on them if you know that they're diabetic and they need their insulin refrigerated, like all of that stuff. If you know it ahead of time, it's way easier to navigate a crisis situation so that we reduce the terror, reduce the fear, and we collectively come together, which I also think is a larger Jupiter and Cancer story, that we will be each other's allies because we are faced with challenging situations.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And that, I was just looking while you talk, things come to me, and I was just like, yeah, because very soon after that, Venus is square Mars. Venus is at the bending. It's like, it's so when it squares the nodes, that's what we refer to as the bending or the bendings. I've heard people say both, but this T square to me, along with Mars, it's squaring Mars too, is something that I'm trying to suss out or figure out, because they both answer to Mercury retrograde at this moment, so I'm just like, it's like having to, I think that's the bittersweet part, knowing that you have to do something and actually doing it, that seems like that could be the bittersweet part about what you were saying. And then the moon hits Uranus that morning. So it's along with Saturn, a sun square Chiron. There's just a lot here on the 19th, 20th, and then the 23rd, I think, is the exact Venus square Mars. But Venus, like you said, it's connection, it's other people, so what do we do in moments where people may lose or things may get cut away with Mars at the South Node? We have to, rethink who we are, what we're about, what our identity is, and then also what's important, and consider other people in our minds, instead. I do think Mercury retrograde in Leo to a certain extent can be about maybe rethinking the being center stage part of this. It's like Leo does love to be center stage, but maybe Mercury retrograde's like, well, let's rethink how we are, maybe in that way.
Yeah. And I also think, like, if you are Leo and you don't have the impulse, like, I don't want to be center stage. I think it can be heart-centered stage too. I think it's not necessarily you center stage as performing for others, but how do you honor your own heart center? Because in like the astrology man, the heart is Leo.
Yeah, it's what you love.
It's what you love. And like, are you authentically shining out from that heart space? And it might be that that retrograde is expressing, and maybe it is coming from a crisis situation of like being like, this is how I know that I can shine because I'm coming from that heart space and not the head space. I think that can be that square with Mars and Venus can be answered with that, authentically coming from that place of love, compassion, warmth, all the best things of Leo. And, Mercury's in the bounds of Saturn. So it's kind of operating from the rules that Saturn is giving them. And I think that's going to actually be helpful of just like doing it in a very diplomatic, structured way of, this is what I believe is the way you should treat people. And because of this crisis or whatever comes up, I'm gonna dig into my heart and operate from my heart center.
I meant conjunct, sorry. Yes, I agree with you. I was looking for the exact time because of what you were saying about the bounds and making sure that yeah, it's just, and Mercury's moving so slow, it's extremely loud in that heart-centered space. It's very, very, it's like a magnifying glass there on the heart chakra, so I wonder when the exact Venus Mars square is. That's the 23rd, right? Yeah, so it's building up to that square too. And at that point, Mercury's only moved like a degree, and the sun ingresses Leo there too. So on the 22nd.
Yeah. Which will go right into an opposition with Pluto.
That's right. It sure will.
Again, I think a continuation of, like, we're talking about the Saturn square to Jupiter. We're talking about the opposition of all the Leo things happening to Pluto, the squares, the opposition of the moon to Uranus twice, like within a couple of hours, and then Uranus going into that sign, and like all the things. It's like it's just the latter half of the month is way more frenzied than that middle station of the month. But I feel like that I don't feel like that the middle of the month is going to feel any less frenzied. It's just going to be like this one story that we feed on. And then all of the shifts that are happening will be like a machine all kind of clicking into place, moving the same story along, but maybe showing up in different areas. Like the only thing that doesn't have stuff happening is in Libra, Taurus, Sagittarius, and Capricorn. The rest, there's like everything else has story going on.
And I know I have asteroids in here, but I've been paying a lot more attention. I used to use them more, and I just feel like they're showing up a lot more in my own consciousness lately. So, I mean, even Vesta and Juno, and for a while, Black Moon Lilith and Scorpio is there, but I've been also watching Hygeia transiting Gemini too, and wondering what that story is, because Hygeia is, health and the kind of a medical asteroid, if you look at it that way. I mean, these have such rich archetypes. I can't, we're not going to get into it in this, but I was looking too at the new moon opposite Pluto exactly. Because that really is the opposition. It's only a few minutes off of that. So you have the 20th with Mars at the south node, the 23rd Venus square Mars, then and 22nd Sun and Leo, and then 24th is the new moon. And so it's like bam, 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 right there, like you were saying. What do you have to say about this new moon?
Well, I love the new moon that's at the end of June. And so what I'm doing is I put together this like new moon meditation for the one that's happening in June. And when I got to the end of the meditation, I was really thinking about the new moon in July for Leo, because the luminaries only rule one sign. Like the moon rules Cancer, the sun rules Leo. And so because of that, they kind of feel like they're like step siblings in a way. They're like they're bonded, with because the luminaries only find domicile in one place. And so I was thinking about this new moon, and what I'm choosing to do is to have this new moon be a continuation of the new moon that happens in Cancer. So whatever story is happening in Cancer, kind of feeding it over into the story that will then be continued or lily padded for the one in Leo. Not that, you shouldn't do something unique and special for the new moon in Leo, but it just feels like they're bonded in that way. And it might just be that Mercury retrograde that's kind of going back, in the Leo house. It just feels like it's more of a retrospective new moon. And so, I'm using it, but as like kind of a doubled moon. And also like when the moon is full, when the sun is in either of the signs, the moon is full in a Saturn sign, and Saturn is having moved into Aries, and is conjoined Neptune. It just feels like there's such a Saturn tone to the summer, Saturn squaring that Jupiter and all that, that I've kind of like the Cancer Leo houses for me they're like was it on Uranus school trip? You have like your little buddy, like I'm responsible for you, you're responsible for me. And that's kind of how I'm like bonding the Cancer Leo. I also think that there's trauma from the Mars retrograde that the Leo and Cancer houses still have with each other. And so a long-winded answer to that question is I'm looking at this new moon as like a second phase of the Cancer new moon, just because there's so much similarity in the conflict that both of those houses have been through together, and then are also dealing with. Cancer's got the square from Saturn, and then Leo has the opposition from Pluto.
Yeah, and moon being trine Saturn, it's even more Saturn tone to it, the opposition here, I can't draw a straight line, but that does feel like that was a funky opposition, wasn't it? Maybe
it's like
it was. It's like being aware of the fact you need to empower yourself in a place, and what are you going to do about it in the other spot?
Mm.
I feel like Pluto and Aquarius is like, that's where we need to be empowered, and where we also need to work with ideas of transformation and maybe what we're burying deep down, but the opposite sign, Leo, is so bright and so illuminated. And so to have this be like, okay, well, in order to do something in that area, I have to change this area. And Saturn's helping me do that, right?
Mm.
So, and I can see how that works in everyone's chart. Uranus is helping me do that. There's lots of positives to this new moon with regard to, depending on how you look at Saturn, as only malefic or as structural and integrity and things of that nature. So it's, we need to redo this area. We may be rethinking or redoing something in the Aries area as well. And then definitely Uranus and Gemini changing things up. It's almost like, yeah, we got to do something about this,
Mm-hmm. What also comes up is like the idea of, with any sort of groups of people. So if we look at Pluto and Aquarius as like groups, like the larger collective, there's a lot of peer pressure that can come from having an opinion that the group agrees with. And even if you like on paper think, I generally believe the same that you believe, but I don't believe exactly what you believe. Like it really got on my nerves, and I understood the intention. Everybody had the sign, like, in this house, we believe blah, 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 blah. And on paper, like, yes, I do agree on those things, but having like this collective thought that unless you agree with everything that I agree with, then you are outside of this political movement or outside of this social group or outside of this religion or whatever. I think being so precious with, you can disagree on things and still be a part of the collective effort. And I like a Leo new moon with a retrograde Mercury being pretty close to be like, be strong in your convictions of what you believe. And you may find yourself in opposition from this. I mean, I hate using like right thought because everybody disagrees on something, but there can be this like peer pressure of you have to agree on this litmus of all of what the progressive agenda is or the Christian agenda is, or you have to have this like uniform of ideas in order to like be a part of the group. And I just think that we just shoot ourselves in the foot when we don't allow nuance, that there are multiple ways to look at issues. And I think you can find clarity and be helpful in collective efforts if you have a good, authentic core of exactly you believe things. It's like, raising a child, we're both moms, and it's important that my child discern why he has beliefs, not because I have them, but because he has the capacity to think through and be problem solving and also believe it in an emotional way in his core. And teaching him that, to me, feels like the best thing a parent can do is like give him the tools to figure this out when I'm not around, to give him his ideas. Because if you just absorb an idea from someone else without doing the emotional work and the truth, like the truth of fire signs is so beautiful. Fire just illuminates truth, and being authentic to that, I think that new moon might be you might be challenged, I guess, during that new moon because of the opposition to Pluto, to really sit in the dark and be like, you know what? I may not agree with this group on so many things, but I agree with them on this one thing. But that doesn't mean that I'm antithetical to all of the other things that I align myself with. You know what I mean? And I think we can think about it in political ways, but it can be other ways too. Like I'm a crunchy hippie. Like I work in the supplement industry. But every once in a while, like I buy Coca-Cola. Like who gives a fuck? Like that doesn't mean that I also don't take herbs and eat organic and like compost at my house. Like I can have these things that are conflicting. That's like a very petty example, but it can be that, like, you can be multifaceted, and it doesn't negate the idealism that you hold if you agree with someone that you previously would disagree with on every other subject. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, I love that view. I love it. It screams Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah, I mean, I'm to me, like, I'm looking at that day just for that opposition to Pluto. I'm always really curious for harsh aspects to Pluto, even though it's the outer planet that moves the slowest, that we kind of track. but it's so potent.
Mm-hmm.
It's impotent. It's so rich with power.
Yeah.
That I'm always curious, especially, because we're really experiencing this Pluto in Aquarius for our lifetime. We're discovering what this means. And the sun opposite Pluto, we look at solar figures, and we look at, is there challenges to that? Is there challenge to authority? Is there challenge to authority in our own life? And we look at father figures, with the sun being typically related to that masculine yang energy, so just collectively, are we looking at patriarchy? Are we looking at, figures in business or political leaders? Like, I look at that, look at generationally, like the Pluto and Leo generation, the baby boomers, like them being challenged by this, the new ways of thought. I mean, just like the challenges of like boomers being unable to identify AI images, to me is like
Oh, yeah.
troublesome. It's like, and then, are we unable to discern, like, or do we think everything is AI and not really believe what's actually filmed? Like, I think that can be part of that tension.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. And Neptune and Aries, I mean, they're making Neptune and Saturn are making the sextile to Uranus and Gemini too. So it definitely feels like lots of topsy-turvy things turn on their heads,
yeah.
not necessarily, getting it. And I think that your assessment is right. And that is I guess that I think that's going to be a big one this month at this new moon. It's like the full moon in Capricorn is just much more, it's got ambiance or something.
Mm-hmm.
This one's more like I don't know, it kind of is hitting you square in the face with something. So and then the next thing is the 30th. So that's kind of going to dominate the space for a minute until
Yeah.
something changes.
It's funny, both of the moons kind of do that. Like the lunation happens, and then we have like a descent from it. Like, how
That's
do
true.
we how do we integrate that into
Yeah.
into the week?
Yeah.
I will say I'm very excited for the 30th for Venus to go into Cancer.
Yay. I'm
That's my
excited about that
natal
too.
Venus, and my natal Venus is at 0 degrees 2 minutes. So it's like right on that day on the 30th, to have a Venus return. I heart Venus and Cancer to
Yeah.
100%.
Back to back too, having two really neat things, the
Mhm.
Cazimi and Venus in Cancer. I think that's really cool. I'll take a look at that.
Also, I feel like it sets us up for August. There's some like pretty juicy things happening in August, and that I like that 30th and 31st almost like being the beginning of August. Really, it
Yeah,
feels more aligned with some of the. I mean, there's other things happening in August, not just the juicy ones, but
sure.
it almost feels like July 30th and 31st are kind of be like in the August calendar. I think maybe when we do August, we should start with the 30th of July just to start there and kind of set the mood.
I agree. Venus. Oh, I was supposed to pull up Venus in Cancer. Exactly. There we go. 10:57 p.m. Well, Central Time. So that's midnight for you, or
Yeah.
close to midnight.
And Saturn and Neptune are right on top of each other.
I know. I know. I mean,
Squaring that, but whatever.
yeah, I guess it just depends on, it's almost like how Jupiter had to escape that square a little bit. Venus, encounters it,
Mm-hmm.
but Venus has I think well, it's in mutual reception with the moon in Libra. So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. Even though they're square signs, they're still in mutual reception.
Yeah.
And it has the help of Jupiter too in Cancer. So it's almost like Venus and Jupiter are kind of winning this one. It's how
Mm-hmm.
it feels.
Yeah,
So
because Saturn and Neptune are retrograde. Yeah,
mhm.
and Venus, I feel like Venus charms Saturn and Neptune in that way. Um, she's forward, she's not going to go retrograde for a while, so she's got some good speed. She's not going to spend that much time. Like we looked, Venus went into Gemini on the 4th and is
Mhm.
already in Cancer,
Moving
so that was like
fast.
3.5 weeks. And so she's going to go through Cancer pretty quickly too.
That's right. And I mean, you'll even have a trine from the moon, granted the moon in Scorpio, but you'll have a trine from the moon almost immediately as well once
Mhm.
the moon moves into Scorpio. When is that? Let's see, that is
Like
very
12
close
hours
to
later. Yeah.
Cazimi. Yeah. I mean, you do have it squaring Pluto, but that's okay. That's fine. Yeah, I just taking a look at what this end of the month stuff might feel like, because it's like there's there's stress present, but Venus knows how to direct us to self-care and to the things that matter the most, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Mercury retrograde to a certain extent, because even Mars is answering to that, Uranus is answering to that, and it's going Cazimi. So there's like just these little moments of, I know that may be going on. I know that that's there, but I know how to take care of myself, and I know what's important right now.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of type shit. The Cazimi, I mean, the Venus ingress is a harbinger for the luckiest day of the year, you know, which I'm really excited about. So I call it the luckiest day of the year, Venus Jupiter conjunction in August, and that's going to be really nice. So Venus in Cancer is just going to be like, okay, we're on the way to that, and I think that's really great. And then the Cazimi is at 9 degrees. Let me get that up, because I'm looking forward to this for personal reasons, I have to say, but also because I think this message with the sun in its own sign is
Mm-hmm.
going to be very powerful. Plus all the new moons that we had at 9 degrees for the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And just the 9th degree is screaming at me. It's also my Saturn degree. So 83 babies, pay attention. Yeah, I think it's funny that the moon is in Scorpio, though. Of course, it's going to square it. But it's in Venus's. Oh my gosh, it's 9 degrees 0 minutes exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just seeing that. I mean, I like this Cazimi. It's an inferior conjunction because Mercury is going backwards, right? And when it Cazimis again, it'll be in Virgo, where Mercury is exalted and at home, and that'll be that fresh renewal. And so, you know, like talking about like speaking from an authentic place and identifying kind of what is, are you acting from that core? Are you acting from that heart center? I like having Venus and a water sign and that emotional realm sign connected to the moon. Um, with when that Cazimi happens, because I feel like there's going to be just like really, you know, the sun can be harsh, the sun can burn, the sun can illuminate, it can burn away. And to have Mercury come in there and be like, okay, what's the heart of the matter? While Venus is at like, what's like the soul of the matter? Having those two, having the luminary houses, like have these kind of auspicious transits happen a day apart.
Yes.
Before we get into the sun, like we're in the sun season, but in August when like things really come into the sun season. I mean, I like Cazimis, and this Mercury Cazimi on this way, it's like it will then weave the Leo and Virgo houses together, because the next time it happens will be at Virgo. Can you look to see when that is? Is that
when the Cazimi and Virgo
the
is?
next Cazimi is?
September 13th.
Right. So that's in between the eclipses too.
Yes, and it's it's very close to where Mars hit the South Node too.
At 19.
There's lots of things there. I wanted to show you the Sabian symbol for this, because I was like, ooh. Because when it's at exactly a degree and 0 minutes, you're supposed to read for that degree. And it's glass blowers shape beautiful vases with their controlled breathing. I was like, oh, I love that.
With fire and air. Yeah.
The need to involve one's most spiritual and vital energies in the creative act if it is to produce significant and beautiful new forms. So
creative intensity.
That's it.
Yeah.
I was like, that's great, especially considering, like you said, it's the inferior, and it is meant to be, I think, introspective, and it's meant to be about, I mean, Leo is a self kind of sign, you know, and like you said, it's heart-centered self, but that is your creativity. That is what you love to do, what brings you joy, what's fun, what's play, you know. So and I think that may be one of the more rebellious acts you could do right now.
to create. Yeah.
Yeah, I really do. I think that's the way to approach this cazimi. And having Venus in Cancer too, I think it's just going to vibe really, really good around that day.
Yeah.
Yes, with the square to Saturn. Yes, there's that. But I mean, like I said, Venus is always that cooling salve. So it's almost like like if you put a bandage on a burn. If you think of Saturn and Aries and Neptune and Aries kind of like a burn, and you put a bandage on it, at first it stings just a little, but it's going to make it feel better. It's going to protect it, won't get infected. And that's the square of Venus to me, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I used to work at a bakery, and we had this blend. If you got burned by the oven, because everybody got burned by the oven, it was aloe and lavender, because the lavender sucks the burn out. Like if you put aloe on a burn, or aloe that has lavender in it, it's almost like it just that healing power of the flowers just like pulls the burn off of the nerves. It's really magical, and it's like something as subtle as like a beautiful scented flower of lavender, but that is like this great antidote to like this singeing fire burn. And so it's like, look at the burned place in your Aries house, and what kind of beautiful flowers, what intensive creative idea can you come that inspires you to like find that combination, find that alchemy to like soothe it. And end of July in the northern hemisphere, it is hot. It is hot, hot, hot. I mean, it's hot now, and we're a month away from it. And I mean, I wonder about just like weather. I know that you kind of geek out on astro weather, literally like the weather. Like, I wonder what kind of weather we're going to have, and preparing for like cooling things. Like, lemon is heating, but lime is cooling. Like, make sure you have more limes in your life and less lemons to like pull that heat away and like cool off, and enjoy, mojitos as opposed to margaritas. Like, just that simple thing, of like playing with the food and the socialness and the lovingness of that Venus. Venus is in the bounds of Mars, but it's in the decan of Venus. That first 10 degrees of Cancer, it's the Lord of love. So it is such a lovely place for Venus to be, that I think that she's going to kind of tame that fiery beast of that retrograde Saturn. That's over there in Aries. It's going to back away. And then there will be, like, we're talking about the square from Saturn to Jupiter. But when Neptune and Saturn go into Pisces, what's September 1st, when it goes in, it's going to trine it. So it will, we're dealing with these squares, but then we're just going to have trines. We're going to have trines from Jupiter to Cancer, and then we're going to have trines from Aries to Leo next year. So this really is, we're the Saturn Jupiter square, at least, we're already past it. At this point, it's just separating, and then it's just going to be that supportive place. So
I agree. I mean, we even have the trine of Mars to Pluto and Uranus coming up very soon, and its opposition to Saturn. And that's, not far into August, just as a little sneak preview, so there's that. There's, when Saturn moves back in. And then, of course, there's these days when the moon moves into Pisces and Mercury's direct on August 11th, and Venus and Jupiter together. And this whole August 10th, 11th, especially after Mercury goes direct, is a really good, goes direct at 2:29 a.m. August 11th Central Time. So basically, when you get Monday morning, it's auspicious. It's like, and I think you could even use the Mercury retrograde there, the station, I mean, as some sort of elective something, I just haven't quite tuned into it yet, but I love this date, August 11th.
Yeah, with the moon and Pisces and Venus and Jupiter coming together, and that direct Mercury now determined to go through the cazimi again. The trine from Mars to Pluto to Uranus. Yeah,
it's just an incredibly, and I've already talked to like several musicians. I'm like, release, it's a good release date. It's a good release date. Do it. So I'm trying to get our album done. Love Rat album on a Love Rat day. That's what it feels like.
Speaking of August, you want to send the invite out to folks?
Yes.
We joked around about like having a live audience.
We did, and I think we
will.
Yes. I mean, especially Leo being what it is, and I know that I should be doing more Leo-like things with my own life. So I think you probably feel the same way. And we need to be in front of people, and maybe even they could say, ask questions or send chats if we're good enough to juggle that. We'll see.
Yeah. So the invite is to, if you want to be a part of the forecast for August, we're going to record in the end of July. And if you want, just email, I guess you can email me practicalastros@gmail and just say, hey, I want to be an audience member. We're going to record it on Zoom. And then, we'll have the chat open. We can answer questions as we go along. You won't be on camera, but you'll just have to, if you want to be a part of it and you want your questions to be a part of it, because if you're going to ask a question, we're going to answer it. It's going to be on the video. So
that's right.
Yeah, if you want to be an audience member, just come on down. Bob Barker, just come on down.
Yeah, it'll probably be after July 22nd. We just don't know the exact date yet, but I'm sure we'll do a graphic and post it or something to let people know. Because that will be fun. I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Any other thing coming up? Yes, we have Ask workshop for the eclipse coming up in September. That also will be publicized at some point.
Yeah.
We picked a date, but I can't remember off the top of my head when it was. Because the eclipses are happening again 6 months later. We still have eclipses to work with. This is going to be the only North Node full moon lunar eclipse that we have in Pisces.
For the cycle,
for the whole thing. So I think it's they all have a little bit different flavor, and they're all interconnected. And if you were there or not, we could reflect also back on what we were talking about before and look forward. So that's going to be fun. That's with the Ask Collective. And I'm Mandi with Ecstatic Astrology.
And Mandi is open for readings.
I am open for readings. Wide open. So y'all holler at me, ecstaticastrology.com, or any socials. You can do it that way too. And Christa's open for readings too.
I'm open for readings too. I'm going to be on vacation during the craziness of July. So my calendar is a little blocked off, but I do tarot readings kind of on the fly. So if you're in desperate need, my tarot calendar is always open because I always have a tarot deck near me and I can do that. But open for readings, and I'm doing a lot of writing on Substack, doing the YouTubes, and just creating a lot of astrology adjacent content. I hate the word content, but I have not figured out a better word. It's creations, it's projects, it's art projects, it's shit that I make with my mouth and my hands.
That's right.
And my mind and my heart. And sometimes the post office. I have a real life letter campaign called Selena Dromion that's been really, it's a labor of love that I actually really, really do like making. I made, that's in right here, some little matchbooks, and I sent and did
love it.
Just made little ones. My favorite one that says as above, so ablaze, because it's matchbooks. But just follow us on socials and you'll figure it out.
That's right. And also check out the Ask Collective. That's a bunch of us doing that together. So there's lots of things to check out, and please comment, share, subscribe.
Yep. Right? It's free to subscribe both of our channels. It doesn't cost you anything. And it puts us into it, kind of the way I imagine this is pushes our boat into the algorithm sea so that other people have access to this astrology, to our sordid senses of humor, to the information that we're sharing. And it's a collective effort. So we appreciate all the engagement.
That's right. Happy July.
Happy July. Good luck.